guys. My name is Paige Nelson, and this is the Paige A. Nelson podcast. A little bit about me. I'm 33. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and I've been in the analytic field for almost a decade now. Currently, I run my own analytic consulting firm here in the city, and I specialize in analytic and automation strategies for enterprises ranging from professional development, professional services, just to real estate and higher education. So it's quite a spread. But I'm glad you guys are here. Thank you so much for listening. And let's just hop right into it, right? I started this podcast because I built a pretty solid community on TikTok discussing things like business and finance and data. And I feel like we need a format that's a little bit longer so we can, run with it. I don't know that TikTok is really the most appropriate place for us to have longer form conversations. And so I decided to launch this podcast. So hopefully you guys stick around with me. Today, I want to talk all about side hustles. I have had a myriad of different side hustles over the years. I've had my own vintage resale shop. I've had Bergamot Company, which started off as a clothing line and eventually evolved into a skincare company. I've done real estate. I've had quite a few different side hustles in my time, and there's so many different lessons in there, and I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that and my journey and how I really just don't advise most people to start a side hustle unless you have a considerable amount of time and money. So I used to work for the state of Texas, and we would get paid once a month. So I was 24, 25 years old and getting paid once a month. All right, that was not going to work for you, girl. I needed money every day, every week, every 2 weeks at least, dear God. Anyway, so I decided to start reselling sports paraphernalia. And it was just something that I thought was going to be buy, raise the price, sell it. Okay. And it was not that at all. It was not that at all. Ultimately, it was a lot more work on the front end than I ever thought. And I know how people feel about resellers. I know the sentiment is not the best when it comes to people just kind of upping a price of something and selling it to the next person. But that was where my journey began, and it taught me a lot, right? So not only did I have to source these items and get a deal on these items, I also had to post these items, upload them to different platforms. So I had to take the pictures, I had to write the descriptions, I had to interact with potential buyers, right, and answer their queries. So it ended up being a huge chunk of my time on top of, when I did make a sale, it was, rushing to make sure that the product was in the mail almost same day, if not next day. And so I just found that I did not have the freedom and the flexibility that I thought I could have working for myself and making the amount of money that I needed at the time. So that was probably my first lesson that, it's going to be more of a time drain than you think. I think now with like automations and AI, it's probably much easier to start a little resale shop, but several years ago, it was not at all. It was a lot of manual work and little profit. I mean, the profit margins were probably somewhere around 3 to 4%. And that wasn't sustainable. It wasn't even worth my attention, honestly, at the time. So I ended up getting a part-time job, which I highly recommend to people who are strapped financially, right? Forget the side hustle, ignore all the side hustle videos, ignore the passive income videos, because if you need money, if you need cash, you need to go get a job. All right. You need more income, right? Real income. You don't need to be starting nobody business. So that's that lesson there. My second business that I started was a clothing line called Bergamot Company. It had three articles of clothing. My manufacturer was based out of LA. I sourced I did all that, right? I looked up the manufacturers, vetted them, We had several conversations while my clothes were in production, but also kind of before production, which I really appreciated. My manufacturer would ask me questions about, how are people going to find your business? How are you going to make sales? Just things that I think aren't really asked up front for young entrepreneurs. So at the time, I think I was 26 by this time, 26, 27 when this started. Anyway, so I ended up paying, I think, like 4,000, 5,000 for my samples. And then I remember going into the first major purchase order and thinking, okay, all right, once I purchase these goods, like I'm good, right? All I got to do is upload the items to my website, because I did create my website. So I was like, all I got to do is upload the items to my website, and then we just gonna sell. And I'll be honest with you, I had no marketing plan. I had no marketing strategy. I didn't think nothing about that, right? I was just like, I'm just gonna post this shit on Instagram and it's gonna go off, right? Because I had seen so many other people do this. We'll get to there. So I got my first invoice for the first big order, and it was $30,000. Let me say that again. My first invoice was $30,000. Please. Okay. I think I quickly realized that the money required up front to start these little clothing brands or to start some of these businesses, side hustles, right? Because this was intended to be a side thing, right? On top of my full-time job. The money needed was actually way more than I anticipated. Okay. Needless to say, we scratched that. I ended up not doing that, but I kept the name, I kept the branding, and I ended up switching to skincare, which I have a background in chemistry. And I love skincare. So I ended up developing my own soaps and face oils that did really well. But, again, just way, way, way too much time that needed to be invested into the business in order for my business to sail, and not having a marketing strategy really hindered my business, I feel like, from the growth that I wanted, especially up front. Okay. So there's kind of two really important points in that story right there. First and foremost, just because you see somebody do something doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it, right? Because you don't have the same resources, access to capital, and time that they probably have. So just because you see somebody post their successes and their wins online, doesn't mean that they're giving you the full, complete picture of what it took to get there, right? I didn't have loans or stipends for my parents. I didn't have anybody paying my bills. I just didn't have, somebody to take care of the house while I took care of the business or the side hustle. Like, I didn't have any of that. And I think that it's something that we don't talk about enough when we see those kind of videos. Just remember that, those people might have a support system that you don't necessarily have. Those people might have, a credit card limit that's $100,000. You over there with $1,000 credit limit. You know what I'm saying? So like, you just keep those things in mind when you are going into this side hustle, thinking that this is going to be something that's going to be grandiose or eventually be passive or lead me to financial freedom. And then the second point of that conversation is that, starting a side hustle, you really, really, really have to think about how much time you have available. Because if you're already tired and worn out and stressed out by your 40-hour job, just imagine an extra job on top of that. Okay. But this is not just a job, right? This isn't somewhere you can go and clock in, clock out, and you're done. You get a check. This is a business, right? So it only runs when you run, right? So if you're not in the position to dedicate a substantial amount of time to this, somewhere between, on average, they say 5 to 20, but I'll be honest with you, it's more like 10 to 20 hours a week, then I don't think starting a side hustle is necessarily the best option for you. It's definitely much easier to dedicate 10 to 20 hours a week to a part-time job where you know that there's a guaranteed paycheck at the end of this in 2 weeks, than dedicate 10 to 20 hours a week to a business where you might not make money for 2 weeks, right? Especially if you have not thought about your marketing strategy. So just keep all that in mind. And then let's roll into my third venture into side hustle, which was real estate. I started my real estate journey in 2021. So pandemic-ish era. And oh child. I started with the notion of like, okay, I work from home. I was working remote at the time, and I can do this on the side. And I know so many realtors who are part time. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like this could totally be a little part time ting for me. Something that I want you to remember for like ever is that if it's somebody's full time job, it probably can't be your part time job. So there are full time realtors for a reason. Real estate is really, really, really heavy in time. So and it's not really lucrative in money until months later. Okay. So it can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to close on a property. Right. And that's to close. Right. So, but you got to get there. As a realtor, you're going to have to show your client spaces, different houses, different options in order for them to make a sound decision. And that takes time in and of itself, right? That could take months as well. So just think about all of that. And then also think about how much can go wrong before you get to that closing table, right? You still have inspections, you still have appraisals, you still have earnest money that you have to think about. Like there's just so many things that where people can be like, you know what, never mind. And you will have dedicated months, just hours of your time, and nothing comes out on the back end. That is so common for so many different realtors across many states. So I went into it thinking I can do this on the side, make like an average of $6,000 a month, y'all. I was crazy. I don't know where I came up with those numbers, but the math on that piece of paper, okay? And that's cool. That's going to be cool. That's going to be enough money for me to be able to, pay off my debts and like stack some bread and like really kind of get myself ahead of the game. And so at the time, I really didn't need a secondary income, but I really was like, okay, let me, it would be nice, right, to be able to, again, do those things that I just mentioned and sort of lead to, get a little bit closer to financial freedom. And ultimately, girl, I didn't even sell a single fucking property. All right. I ended up just dealing with a lease. So I ended up getting one client into an apartment, into a house. And that took work. All right. Because you got to find clients. Who doesn't know a realtor, right? Who doesn't already have their realtor? Not to mention most people buy 1 to 2 houses in their lifetime. And I don't even think that number is going to be the same anymore moving forward. So most people, especially nowadays, are unfortunately renting. Most young people, let me say this. Most young people are renting, and older people typically already have their realtor who they've worked with in the past, or a family friend, or somebody that they know. So it's really hard to kind of like break into those spaces. You're going to have to be actively marketing. Actively. I think real estate is probably the first time where it finally clicked to me that marketing is a huge component of starting a business, right? Even if it is a side hustle, you have got to market yourself, whether that's you talking online, you creating infographics, whatever the case may be. You got to pick a platform and you got to hit it, and you got to hit it hard. And I just wasn't really ready to do that, right? I still had my full-time job, and even though that was remote, it was still a little bit demanding. And so being available to show houses or to show apartments at any time in the day was really, really hard. And so again, if it's somebody's full-time job, odds are it's going to be hard for it to be your part-time job. Not impossible, but hard. Okay. And that's not me saying that you should quit your full-time job and pursue your side hustle. Not at all. Okay. And that's another fallacy that I feel like a lot of people fall for, especially on the internet. Do not quit your full-time job to pursue no part-time nothing, unless you have multiple streams of income coming in. You got a lot of money saved, your bills paid for, your bill, you know what I'm saying? Your bills paid up, or whatever the case may be. Just make sure you have yourself in a great financial position in order to be able to do something like that, right? Make sure that you can still apply for credit cards. Make sure that your credit's not ruined before you go do something like that. Make sure that, you probably have 6 months to 12 months of money saved up for a rainy day, because you don't know how long it's going to take for you to start generating income. So yeah, I mean, starting a side hustle sounds good in theory, right? Because it's additional money into your household every month, every week, whatever the case may be. But there's so many of them that I just don't necessarily agree with, and I think selling a product or a service is probably number one. Again, if you are strapped for cash, maybe you should turn to something that's already a little bit established, such as working a part-time job, like I said, or even a delivery service, right? Ubering, Lyft, things of that nature. And we know that that has changed over time as well. So that money may not be the same anymore either. I know that I was researching whenever I knew that I wanted to have this as a topic. I started researching some statistics and found out that less than 10% make an average of $1,000 a month from their side hustle. And with those numbers, I mean, that's a lot of time, right? We're talking anywhere from 5 to 20 hours a week, right? Of dedication and time and energy, and yielding potentially less than $1,000 a month out of that. And I hope that we continue to grow and we continue to have these honest conversations about business. I could really see this blossoming into something great. So thank you guys for listening. I will be back soon and hope you guys have a great night.